I welcome you to the 9th lecture of this NPTEL MOOCs course titled Psychology of Stress, Health and Well-Being. So, this is the 3rd lecture of module 3 and overall it is 9th lecture. So, today we will talk about how some of the personality variables influence our stress reaction. So, before we talk about today's lecture, let us have a brief recap of the last lecture, that is lecture 8. So, in the last lecture actually last 2 lecture we have been talking about the concept of post traumatic growth, and in last lecture specifically we were talking about the various theoretical explanation of PTG or post traumatic growth, how post traumatic growth happens and what are the theoretical explanations to it. So, in that we try to look into some of the popular models. So, we have discussed Janoff-Bullman's 3 explanatory model, and these models were where PTG reports or experiences were explained using 3 models. One is strength through suffering. So, that was one of the idea that this was a kind of common idea in our collective consciousness, that we develop strength or we kind of realize our hidden potential through suffering. The second model was psychological preparedness. So, the idea was that adversities or crises in life or stressful experiences in life help us to prepare for the future stress, simply because it changes our core beliefs and assumptive world in a different way, so that whenever such future occurrences happens, we are more prepared for it. And the third model was existential re-evolution. So, basically that talks about how in the context of traumatic experience people get involved into existential questions and meaning making process, and how all this through the process of meaning making post traumatic growth can happen. So, we have discussed these 3 models of Janoff-Bullman. Then we have discussed the process of PTG using functional descriptive model proposed by Tedeschi and Calhoun, which is one of the most popular theory of post traumatic growth, which basically use the metaphor of earthquake to understand how PTG happens. So, they kind of use this metaphor of earthquake, where they said that as earthquake shatters physical structures in the physical world, similarly traumatic events are like earthquakes in our mental world, which shatters mental structures, particularly our belief systems, our core ideas, schemas, assumptive worlds. And when we rebuild those mental structures as a learning process, we rebuild them in such a way that they are more stronger and more resistant to future shock, as we do it while rebuilding physical buildings after earthquakes. So, it was a similar kind of metaphor that happens. They use this metaphor to explain how PTG happens, and they use the elaborate processes and the factors that are involved in the post traumatic growth, particularly how traumatic event causes distress by shattering our assumptive world and leads to various PTSD symptoms, and then in the process of how we can reduce this distress by using self disclosure and social support, and how these initial ruminative thoughts, which are automatic and intrusive, re-experiencing symptoms of post traumatic stress, can be converted into more reflective and conscious thought, which may lead to post traumatic growth. So, all this detailed process we have discussed. Then we have also discussed organismic valuing theory of PTG, which was proposed by Joseph and Linley in 2005. They use the idea of humanistic psychology, that all human beings are intrinsically motivated towards growth. So, whether we actually achieve growth or not, but this motivation is there inside all of us, that we want to grow and expand in our life. So, PTG is consistent with that idea of growth. So, even though many things get shattered by traumatic event, this inner motivation help us to rebuild our world, which incorporates the growth and expansion in life. They use the idea of assimilation accommodation to explain the diverse outcomes of trauma. Assimilation is primarily when we add new information to the existing knowledge structure, and accommodation is when we change our existing knowledge structure to fit new information. So, they said if we do assimilation, if we engage in assimilation process after traumatic event, it will lead to recovery and people will kind of get back to the pre-trauma baseline functioning level. However, accommodation can happen in two ways, where you just whole mental structure gets changed, and if you do negative accommodation, then obviously your mental structure change, but in the negative direction, which explains all the psychopathologies such as PTSD, and other disorders. However, there can be possible positive accommodation where you change your mental structure, but it is in the positive direction. Such changes can explain the PTG and other thriving experiences. Then we have also discussed the relationship between PTG and well-being, and most of the research shows there is a positive relationship between post-traumatic growth experiences and the indicators of well-being such as self-esteem, and other functionings. PTG has also been correlated with the wisdom, idea of wisdom, and it is inbuilt in the functional descriptive model as well, that post-traumatic growth is kind of related to the development of wisdom, that is a learning experience, insight into life after experiencing crisis in life. And there is not much research available, but at least some research indicates that both are positively related constructs. Then we have discussed how PTG can be facilitated in our life, particularly using Tedeschi and Colquhoun suggestions. They said one of the main thing that can facilitate post traumatic growth is called as expert companionship, where if there are people around you who can empathically listen to you, to your problems and struggles, and that empathic and listening and active listening ear is very important. If that is available, then PTG is facilitated at much better pace. And also they talked about specific pathways, other pathways that can facilitate PTG, such as better understanding about the traumatic experience, getting educated to what trauma does to you, and the processing of traumatic experiences in terms of how it is shattering your core beliefs. These are very important for PTG. Emotion regulation or coping strategies which can reduce your overwhelming emotion is very important, so that you come to your senses and get into the process of reflective processes for PTG to happen. Self disclosure is another factor, they said, very important, because until and unless you discuss and talk about PTG, it is or traumatic experiences, PTG is not likely to happen. Narrative development is very important, where you develop a coherent narrative after the traumatic event, a new narrative of your life, so that you kind of break from the older narratives and get into the new chapter of your life. So that is also very important. And serving people who are of similar victims of trauma or survivors of trauma can also facilitate PTG to you, so that you also are not just concerned about yourself, and you kind of extend your support to other people who are similar to it, and by looking at their struggle also many times people experience PTG. So these are some of the things that we have discussed in the last class. Today we will talk about how personality factors influences our stressful experiences. So in that context, we will talk about type A, type B, psychological hardiness, and locus of control. So these are some of the important concepts that we will discuss today. When we talk about the concept of personality in psychology, what do we mean by personality? We mean very specific thing, in the sense that when we talk about personality variable, basically it includes an individual's unique and relatively consistent patterns of behavior, thinking or feeling or style of response. So what is the relatively consistent patterns of thinking, feeling and acting? So that makes what the concept of personality when we talk about it in the psychological literature. So, these personality characteristics or traits differentiate one person from another person. So, that we can say this person is different from another person in terms of his characteristics. So, those characteristics which defines that person is actually the personality traits or characteristics that makes that person. So, this may be very unique and consistent patterns of thinking, feeling and behaving. So, we need to understand when we talk about something as personality characteristics, these are relatively stable qualities. We do not say something as personality characteristics if it changes on daily basis or after few days it changes, then it is not part of your personality, it is most likely influenced by the situation. So, personality characteristics are, there is a temporal stability in it, in the sense that it does not change so often, and then there is a cross situational consistency in it, in the sense it also does not change based on changing situation too much. There may be some changes, but when it is very strong personality characteristics, across situation you will show those characteristics. So, if I say somebody is extrovert or somebody is introvert, so these are kind of personality description. It means most of the time this person is likely to be extrovert, very outgoing, highly energetic, doing lot of activities. This could be some of the characteristics description of extrovert. So, some of these personality characteristics are very strongly related to our stressful experiences. So, we will see some of these characteristics or personality traits. We will not go into too much of the conceptual basis of personality and other thing, but there are many theories in personality. Some are like trait theories, where they try to describe personalities using different traits, such as extrovert, introvert, and there are process oriented personality theories such as psychodynamic theories or psychoanalysis, where they try to understand the different mechanisms of human personality and how a person becomes the way he or she is. So, there are different theories to explain what personalities are there. So, this lecture is not about those description, but we are specifically interested into specific personality traits or characteristics that are relevant in the context of stress. So, personality traits may influence stress response. What kind of person you are, so it will influence how you respond to stressful circumstances. Some personality traits are more prone to stress as compared to others. So, some people are more prone to stress. If there are stressful situations, they will be very much influenced by it. Some people are not so influenced by it, simply because there are personality differences. So, one such personality trait which is related to stressful experiences is called as type A and type B personality traits. We have discussed about it while discussing in the context of how stress is connected to coronary heart disease. So, these traits were specifically discovered while doing research by two cardiologists who were trying to understand, is there any kind of some specific people are they at higher risk for heart disease. So, in that context they found that two types of personality traits are there which may have some connection with the heart diseases, and we have discussed in detail, and typically I will just briefly talk about it here, that they found two types of individuals in this context. One is type A individuals. They are typically very competitive and achievement oriented kind of people, highly competitive, achievement orientation is there. There is a lot of time urgency, and these people also show a lot of anger and hostility, sometimes which may be expressed and many times it may not be expressed also, but they have these characteristics. And type B people are just opposite, they are more relaxed, there is not much time urgency in their life, they are not much achievement oriented. So, they are more easygoing kind of people, more relaxed kind of people. So, because of these differences in the personality, type A people are more likely to experience stress because of their lifestyle, their psychological makeup, the kind of life situation they kind of put themselves into. Because of their characteristics, they are more likely to experience stress, and high stress leads to various diseases that we have discussed elaborately in many lectures. And it was found that type A people are more likely to have heart diseases primarily because of high stress response or high stressful experiences in their life. So I will not go too much into that because we have already discussed about it while discussing how stress is connected to coronary heart diseases. Then another personality trait or characteristics which is connected to stress is called as psychological hardiness. So, before we talk about, I will just give you some sample questions that are used to identify people with the trait of psychological hardiness. So, I will just read out few sample items from DRS 15 questionnaire by Barton, which measures psychological hardiness. So, these are some of the items. So, people are asked whether these are true in their life or not. So, one item is most of my life gets spent doing things that are meaningful. I really look forward to my daily activities. By working hard, you can nearly always achieve your goals. How things go in my life depends on my own actions. I enjoy the challenge when I have to do more than one thing at a time. Changes in routines are interesting to me. So, these are some of the items that are used to measure psychological hardiness, and you might have guessed that those people who says yes and they are high on these qualities, they are most likely to show psychological hardiness. So, what is psychological hardiness? It is a concept or psychological concept to explain people's behavior, and it was first introduced by a psychologist named Susan Kobasa in 1979. She defines hardness as a set of characteristics. These are set of characteristics that differentiate stress resistant people from those vulnerable to stress. So, and hardiness is primarily characterized by three characteristics which are called as 3 C's, which are commitment, control and challenge. So, the idea is the hardiness basically means, in general sense we use the word hard or hardiness to mean something which is very strong. So, psychological hardiness basically means some qualities makes some people psychologically very strong, and they can endure a lot of pressure and stress in their life and perform under pressure, in challenging tasks. So, these are, some people are simply high on it and some people are not so high in it, and they are not able to, some people are not able to perform under pressure and on challenging circumstances. So, psychologically hardy people are basically those people who has this quality of stress resistance and ability to perform under pressure and stress and challenging circumstances. And what are the characteristics of psychological hardiness? So, according to Susan Kobasa, that there are three important characteristics that makes a person psychologically hardy or tough. So, these are basically, I will just write here. So, these are the three qualities that are important or at least found in people who are psychologically hardy. One is sense of commitment, sense of control, sense of challenge. Commitment is about your ability to remain involved with a task even in the face of stress and difficulties. Control is about your ability or your tendency to influence the outcomes even when of significant events, when it seems very difficult also you still try to make changes. And the sense of challenge is about looking at stressful circumstances as an opportunity to grow, learn and develop oneself. So, these three qualities are very important and they kind of makes or these qualities makes the psychological hardiness or makes human the whole mental setup which can be defined as psychologically hardy. So, I will just give little bit more definitions on these three characteristics. So, commitment, the people with strong commitment believe that it is important to remain involved with people and events that are significant no matter how stressful things become. So, if you have a high sense of commitment, you believe that it is important to remain involved even at the face of highly stressful circumstances. You try to involve, if it is a significant task, you try to involve and commit to the task even at the face of highly stressful circumstances. So, they do not waste time in withdrawal, alienation and isolation. So, generally people with high commitment, then they do not run away so easily from the situation or from the task. They do not withdraw so easily and run away and get alienated and isolated. So, the tendency is not there. If you have high commitment, you would not run away so easily. You will try your best. So, this commitment could be with the task, with the people, in the relationships. So, it could be in diverse aspects. So, people with psychological hardiness has high commitment. Second is sense of control. So, people with strong sense of control continue to have an influence on the outcomes of significant events going on around them, no matter how difficult these become. So, another thing is this sense of control is basically we are talking about internal locus of control that we will discuss after this, which is also another trait or characteristics, personality characteristics connected with the stress. So, this kind of people, they try to influence the event, try to make changes whatever is possible using their own skills and understandings, no matter how difficult this becomes. They still try to influence the outcome, try to change things. So, they do not let themselves slip into powerlessness and passivity. So easily they do not become passive and powerless. They try to make influence or try to change outcomes as much as possible. So, people with psychological hardiness has high sense of control. The third quality is sense of challenge. People with strong sense of challenge interprets stress as normal and regular part of life. So, stress is something, is a normal and everyday part of life and provides an opportunity to learn, grow and develop. So, when you see something as challenging, you do not just get defeated by it, but see it as an opportunity, so that I can expand my skill and learn and grow out of it. They believe that comfort and security is not our birthright. So, I mean, you do not always seek comfort while doing, if you always seek comfort, then you will not be able to do anything significant in your life. So, people with high sense of challenge, they are comfortable in putting themselves in challenging circumstances, because they see it as an opportunity to learn, grow and develop. So, these three characteristics provide psychologically hardy individuals the necessary courage to face stressful situations and grow out of them. So, these are the three important characteristics that are found in the people with psychological hardiness. So, this is also interesting how this whole concept was developed through a long longitudinal research. So, the initial research on hardiness actually came from a 12-year longitudinal study. So, this Maddy and Kobasa, these two researchers, they studied 450 individuals for a period of 12 years. So, that is why it is called as a longitudinal study. When you study a set of people for certain length of time and collect data again and again after certain time interval of time, then such studies are called as longitudinal study. So, they collected data from 450 male and female supervisors, managers and decision makers of Illinois Bell Telephone Company. So, it is an US telephone company that was which is basically IBT company, and they collected data from people at the high post who are doing lot of stressful job like supervisors, managers and decision makers from 1975 to 1987, and the objective of their study was to find out individual differences in the stress reaction. Are there people who are more resistant to stress and some people more vulnerable to stress, and they were trying to look at those individual differences in terms of stress reaction. So, at the start of the experiment in that company was under federal regulation at that time. After the 6 years of the study, so they started in 1975, that is then in 1981 some deregulation happens and hit the company. So, it was no longer under federal regulation, so it was deregulated, and as a result of this drastic change, a lot of chaos happened in the company in terms of job losses, in terms of changing the structure, etc. And it can be evidence. This evidence came from the fact that this company reduced its employee from 26,000 to 14,000 in just 1 year. So, it was a kind of chaotic situation in that company, and still they were collecting data, and they have been collecting data, and it happened in between the study. So, the data collected 6 years after the event, they still collected data after the event till 6 years, and they found that from their sample 2/3 of that sample suffered and collapsed in terms of performance problem, violence, absenteeism, divorce, health problems such as heart attacks, mental problem, etc. So, they found 2/3 of their sample actually collapsed under these stressful circumstances, and this collapse was in terms of performance, absenteeism and many personal issues in their life and many diseases also, disorders also. However, interestingly they found other 1/3 of the sample, they not only survived, actually they thrived in their career after this all the chaotic situation in the company. So, those sample, many of them left the company, and many of them actually rose in the position, and they actually thrived. They grew out of that experience and made significant contributions, and some started their own firms, etc. So, 2/3 collapsed under the pressure or the stress of the new changes in the company. However, 1/3 not only survived, they actually thrived out of that experience. And they found the difference between this 2/3 and 1/3 was actually explained by the psychological hardiness, that is people with a sense of commitment, control and challenge. So, this 1/3 who survived and thrived actually were more psychologically hardy and having these 3 important qualities that help them to survive and grow out of that pressure and the stressful circumstances. So, from that they took this idea, and then many researches were conducted later on, and they found this is an important concept in terms of facing stressful circumstances in life. So, many researches were conducted later on also. So hardiness has been found to be negatively related to both self-report and objective measures of stress. So, people with high sense of hardiness, they generally experience or at least perceive less stress, both in terms of subjective as well as objective measures such as blood pressure, and hardiness was positively associated with psychological well-being. So, that was also people with high psychological hardiness were having better well-being also. Research also shows that hardiness buffer against the development of anxiety and depression. So, generally it serves as a protective factors in psychological disorders also, such as anxiety and depression. So, this helps you to protect from psychological disorders. Research also shows that hardiness serves as both protective factors and a resource that promotes the ability to experience psychological growth following stressful and traumatic event. So, it is both, it serves as a resource as well as protective factor. So, it protects you from the stressful life circumstances and its pressure, and also it provides as a kind of resource. So, you have more psychological resources to deal with the problems of life, simply because of these qualities you have a different outlook towards life. Research also shows that hardy individuals appraise stressful events less negatively. So, that is why they experience less, because as we have already seen in the first lecture, that stress is more about how you appraise it, how you perceive it, rather than objective situation. So, that perception plays very important role, and it shows that hardy individuals appraise stressful event less negatively. Research also shows that hardiness was associated with lower PTSD symptoms among Vietnam veterans. So, veterans who had more psychological hardiness, they reported less PTSD symptoms, and it buffered the impact of combat exposure on PTSD development. So, it also protected them from the combat exposure and the trauma. Psychological hardiness research was also conducted on performance indicators, how people perform under stressful circumstances, and many research shows that individuals high in hardiness have shown better performance under stress in diverse environmental and occupational situations, such as military job, academic job, sports, firefighting job, businesses. In all these contexts, it has been found that people with high psychological hardiness seems to perform better under stressful circumstances, and many of these job are inherently stressful. Research also shows that hardiness also predicts better performance longitudinally, basically as the time passes, and helps to buffer stress within a stressful environment. People with high hardiness responds in a facilitative way to the negative stressors in the environment. So, this is also very important quality. So, under stress they kind of work in a facilitative way, rather than getting away from it. They kind of get involved into it and kinds of perform better. So, the performance gets facilitated under stressful circumstances. Now, in general, the personality traits or characteristics are not easy to change or make changes in them, but at least some research shows that hardiness can be trained, although it can be a part of one's personality, but it can be changed, or at least it can be developed in persons with some training modules. So, several studies have reported that hardiness can be taught to people. MEDI in 1987 developed a hardiness training program to enhance the quality of hardiness among people. So, some training modules have been developed, and still many people use that. So, they propose this MEDI and other his colleagues who are doing core research in hardiness, they propose that hardiness training engages cognition, emotion and action in coping effectively with the stressful circumstances, and uses the feedback from this process to deepen commitment and control and challenge beliefs about oneself in the world. So, in hardiness training, typically what they do is that they teach people how to cope effectively in the environment or in stressful circumstances, and take feedback from these coping situations and increase or deepen the sense of commitment, control and challenge, because these are three important qualities that needs to be enhanced for psychological hardiness. So, while training coping strategies, they also teach how to use or increase these qualities of commitment, control and challenge in different environment, in different stressful circumstances. So, they further said hardiness training is to teach trainees the skills of transformational coping. So, mostly a coping strategy which can transform you, whereby one can decrease the stressfulness of circumstances through cognitively and emotionally exploring one's appraisal to them. So, one thing coping we'll talk more about it in the upcoming lectures. So, appraisal plays very important role, interpretation plays very important role in the stressful circumstances. So, that teaches you how to appraise it in a differently, so that stress becomes lower, so that they reach broader perspective and deeper understanding, and using this information to carry out decision and solve problems. And second, obviously, which is very important for training, hardiness training, is to use the feedback from the coping situation, as I have already told, to deepen the perceptions of commitment, control and challenge. So, there are specific modules people use it. So, I cannot go into too much into that, but the basic idea is there. These three qualities can be enhanced in a coping situation by training people. And some research shows that hardiness training can increase personality hardiness and decrease subjective and objective signs of stress. And they found that result actually persisted over a long time, at least for 6-month follow-up period. Some later study also indicated that hardiness training is more effective than some other coping strategies such as relaxation, placebo and support conditions for increasing sense of hardiness. So, that training was much more better in terms of increasing hardiness quality as compared to other coping strategies. Okay. So, the next personality characteristics that is connected to stressful circumstances, or it influences stress reaction, is called as locus of control. So, again here, before talking about what is locus of control, we will talk about few sample items from another scale that was developed by Roters to measure your locus of control. So, these are 3 sample pair of items. So, one may be more correct for you, one individual, and other statement may be correct for another individual. So, first pair of sentence talks about A, becoming a success is a matter of hard work. Luck has little or nothing to do with. So, one person may believe in it. Or B, getting a good job depends mainly on being in the right place at the right time. So, this could be another belief among individuals. So, some people may believe in first part of A statement much more than B statement. Second, A, what happens to me is my own doing. B, sometimes I feel that I don't have enough control over the direction my life is taking. So, again these are 2 different statements. For some people one may be true, for some people other may be true. Third, most people don't realize the extent to which their lives are controlled by accidental happening. B, there is no such thing as luck. So, you can understand these 3 pairs of statement One pair is more about inner control, or you have a sense that you can make changes in life, you have more control over things in your life, and other statement is about you don't have much control over your life, things depends on external circumstances. So, based on this idea, some people are actually more inner oriented, or they find causality inside, causality of actions and outcomes inside themselves, and some people are more prone to find causes outside themselves. So, this is what is locus of control is all about. So, Rotter, who is one of the main researcher who started this research in the area of locus of control, who proposed this term, proposed the concept of locus of control, which was found to differentiate people on stress vulnerabilities. So, this also differentiate people who are highly vulnerable to stress and not so vulnerable to stress. He coined the term locus of control to describe individuals' generalized beliefs about causality and control. What is the belief about causes of actions and outcomes? So, these are generalized beliefs. So, people in general, some people think like that, and in general some people think in some other ways. So, locus of control includes our general expectancies about the connection between one actions and outcomes. What is the connection between your action and outcome that happens in your life? Locus of control refers to the generalized expectancy to perceive outcomes in life as a result of either one's own action and within one's control, which is called as internal locus of control, as opposed to being determined by external factors such as chance or powerful others, which is called external locus of control. So, locus of control basically could be of two types. So, there can be two locus of control. So, depending on the origin of your sense of control, whether your sense of control is coming from within yourselves or sense of control is outside yourself. So, what is your belief, general belief about the causality of your actions and outcomes? If you believe it is within you, then it is internal locus of control. If you more likely to believe that the causality lies outside you, then it is called as people with external locus of control. So, internal locus of control, people with internal locus of control, so people may differ. Some people are more oriented towards internal locus of control, some people are more oriented towards external locus of control. So, people with internal locus of control generally expects that their action will lead to predictable outcomes and consequences. So, they have more internal locus of control. So, they believe their own actions will make differences in the outcomes. So, they tend to make internal attributions, that things are happening because of my internal actions or my actions, by explaining what happens to them as due to their internal or personal factors. So, if I say I succeeded because of my hard work, so hard work is an internal factor or if I say I failed in a situation because the task was very difficult, or situation was not favorable to me, then you are making an external attributions. So, external locus of control, people with external locus of control generally expects that outcomes are more influenced by external factors such as luck, chance, etc. They tend to make external attributions by explaining what happens to them as due to external or circumstantial factors. So, people with high internal locus of control generally try to master their environment, while those with high external locus of control often perceive that outcomes in life are outside their control and feel helpless. So, this psychological makeup or individual differences, has an effect on your perception of life and your persistence on a task, simply because it will influence your sense of perception and what possibilities are there in your life. So, people with internal locus of control, they will try to make changes and master the environment, whereas external locus of control, they see because things are outside my control. So, they will not put much effort and to change it. They are more likely to feel helpless. So, thousands of studies indicate that internal locus of control is more beneficial as compared to external locus of control in the context of stress and health. For example, external locus of control are associated with ill health, and internal locus of control was found to act as buffer against the effect of stress and health. So, people with high internal locus of control are less likely to experience stress in their life, simply because they are more actively coping with the situation. External locus of control people are mostly using avoidance and running away, which does not solve a lot of problems, and at the end actually they experience more stress. So, people with internal locus of control seems to have a beneficial effect of their sense of perception in terms of health and dealing with the stressful circumstances. For example, an individual may make an external attribution or external causality by believing that there is no point in joining a course or a professional course, as it is very less likely that he will get a job in future. So, if he believes, what is the point of joining a course if I don't get a job in it? So, he may feel I will not be able to get a job in this area. So, what is the point of doing or joining a professional course? So, if a person makes such an external attribution, there is a high chance that he or she may feel more stressed and helpless. Furthermore, job stress is often related to lack of control over nature of work. So, many times people who experience more stress in their job situation, one of the reason is this external locus of control could be one of the important reason. However, it is also important to understand that extremes of either is not good actually. So, people with too extreme internal locus of control may become like perfectionist, and they want to do everything on themselves, which may not be also good in the long run. So, a decent sense of internal locus of control is more beneficial than an extreme sense of internal locus of control. So, some people may have extreme sense of either of these two, which may not be very good. Locus of control has also been related with the coping style. So, coping we will discuss more in the next class. So, locus of control has been associated with certain coping style. For example, external locus of control has been associated with avoidance coping. People with external locus of control are more likely to avoid situation as a coping, or resignation in the context of greater stress, and they experience more stress and poor health. On the other hand, internal locus of control has been associated with help seeking, positive thinking, lower level of work stress in general. So, they use more proactive and more healthy coping strategies to deal with the stress. One particular theory which of attribution or finding causality has been linked with locus of control, which is called as Weiner's theory of locus attribution theory. This theory was specifically developed to explain how people find out causes in an achievement situation, or when they succeed or fail in a task, how the people explain their success and explain their failure. What are the factors that influences that? So that was his whole idea of theory. Weiner incorporated this notion of locus of control in his theory to understand how people explain their success and failures. So he proposed that in order to predict people's expectancies and behaviors, specifically in the context of achievement situation, it is important to evaluate how the causes of the outcome is perceived in terms of locus of causality, controllability and stability. So he said there are three important set of factors which are very important in terms of how people explain their life situation, specifically in the context of success and failure. Whether they explain it using internal locus of control or external locus of control, or in terms of stability, whether it is a stable factor or unstable factor, or controllability, whether it is a controllable factor or uncontrollable factors that caused success and failure. So this is, so look into little bit more into that. What are these three factors? So according to Weiner, success and failures can be analyzed in terms of these factors. So locus of control we have already explained. We may believe a cause is internal locus of control if its origin is within us. We say it is because of internal locus of control. I failed or succeeded in a situation, or is it because of an external locus of control if the cause originate in our environment or circumstances or outside ourselves. So for example, hard work is an internal factor, whereas luck or characteristics of the situation or the task in which you are doing, it is an external factor. Second is stability. So internal factors and external factor can also differ in their stability. If we believe a cause is stable, it is less likely to change over time. So stable factors don't change often, and unstable factors, they change easily. So for example, hard work is an unstable factor because we can change our level of hard work. I can work very hard or not so hard. So it is kind of changeable or unstable factors. Stable factors could be like my ability and intelligence. You cannot change your ability and intelligence in in days and weeks and months. This is more stable qualities, which is influenced by genetics, environment, so many things. So factors could be stable, unstable, and then later they added one more factor called controllability. So we can believe or we can voluntarily change a controllable factor, and while an uncontrollable factor is one that we believe cannot change easily. So it is kind of related to stability factors, but sometimes it may differ also in certain circumstances. So in that context, again, mostly let's say effort and motivation is a controllable factor, and let's say ability and intelligence are uncontrollable factors. So these three sets of factors influence our explanation of life situations, particularly in the context of success and failure. So according to Weiner, success or failure can be attributed to internal personal causes or external situational causes, and these internal external factors could be either stable or unstable, and they focused on four important factors that play a significant role in our achievement situation in terms of finding causes. One is ability, efforts or motivation, luck, and task difficulty based on these factors. So I'll just show you how this interact with these factors. So, if you use this locus of control and stability, so this could be the 4 important factors. So, internal stable is ability, internal unstable is effort, hard work or motivation. So, external stable factor is like task difficulty, whatever you are doing, whatever task that you want to do in terms of whatever situation you are. So, it is external in terms of, and it is stable in the sense you do not have much control over it. So, whatever task is given, you need to do it. So, in that sense it is called as a stable factor. Then external unstable factor, one factor that influences our decision is luck, which basically means you do not know whether you will become lucky or unlucky. It is very unstable. Sometimes you feel lucky, sometimes you feel unlucky. So, luck is an unstable factor. So, these 4 characteristics, factors plays very important role in terms of our explaining our successes and failure or achievement situations in our life. So, stability attributions, whether a factor is stable or unstable, it will influence our expectancy or prediction about the future. So, if you think a factor is an stable factor is caused my success and failure, it is likely to influence your prediction about future. So, if it is a stable, you are not likely to give much effort for future, or in terms of expectations of what will happen in future. However, if it is unstable, you are likely to have different expectations, or at least you will have expectation that things could change in future. Controllability influences our persistent on a task. So, if you believe a factor is controllable, you will put more effort in it. If you believe it is uncontrollable, you will likely to run away or avoid it. Locus of control influences our emotion reaction. So, whether you are using you are an internal locus of control or using an external locus of control explanation, depending on the situation, there may be diverse emotional reaction, positive, negative, etc. So, let us give an examples how it can influence. Let us say a student fail in an exam, and there are 2 cases. In one case, the student is attributing his failure to lack of ability. So, a student fail in an exam and he sees, or at least explains himself, that he failed because of his lack of ability. What will happen to his expectations and future outcome? What are the possibilities? So, lack of ability is an internal, stable, uncontrollable factor. So it is an internal, but it is a stable and uncontrollable factor. So, it will influence it will lead to low expectancy of future success, because his ability, he is not able to perform well because he is having low ability. If he perceives it like that, then he is not going to expect too much in the future. It would likely to decrease his self-esteem. He may feel humiliation, shame, or leave or quit the situation, simply because he feels there is no point in it, because I am not able to do it, or I do not have the ability to perform. So, his expectancy for future will be very less. It will decrease his motivation, and probably he will leave or quit the situation. However, on the other hand, let us say the student attributes the cause of his failure to lack of efforts. So, he said, I failed because I did not put the necessary hard work. Lack of effort is an internal, but it is an unstable, controllable factors. Then it will lead to more hopeful and positive anticipation, because he will have a better anticipation for future, simply because he thinks he can change the future, because he can change his effort, and may motivate him to amend what he has done wrong in the past, because he can change it, do more effort and change things in the future. So, you can see, based on what kind of attribution a person does, whether it is internal, what if based on the locus of control, stability and controllability, outcomes can be very different. So, these are people use all these explanations in their day-to-day life, and this may influence us. Some people, intentionally, motivationally, they use certain attributions. For example, in a case of success, people may interpret their environment in such a way to maintain their self-esteem or positive self-image. One may attribute their success to internal factors and failure to external factors. So such kind of attribution also protects you, that I succeeded because of my ability, my effort. And when you fail, you may say, I failed because of situation was not good, people were not good in the they were doing a lot of favors to other people, etc., etc. So sometimes we intentionally or unintentionally do such attributions also to protect our self-image. So these are some of the factors that can influence our stress reaction in a certain situation. So personality may also play an important role. So with this, I end today's lecture. Thank you.